I have a confession to make. I used to really be into anime. Don't click off yet, I promise this video is actually worth your while. But this video in particular tackles something that, next to seeing Superman being stabbed by Doomsday and Batman v Superman in the theaters, is the only other time when my disappointment in entertainment became palpable. I'm talking about the Cowboy Bebop Netflix adaptation. See, we do other stuff than just cape stuff on this channel. Hit it!
4 cowboys, 4 bounty hunters, 4 hearts, 4 notes. Following a dusty trail of money, sin, and desperation. Living day to day, dreaming hour by hour. 4 beats, 4 parts of a movement. Mars to Venus, Callisto to Ganymede. Bounty to bounty, and outlaw to outlaw. 1 ship, 1 crew, 1 destiny. Cowboy Bebop.
Back when I was in high school, I originally saw reruns of Cowboy Bebop when Adult Swim brought back its Toonami block, and I fell in love with the show. Now, anime has some quirks, to be sure, that can easily scare away people who aren't really familiar with the genre, but Cowboy Bebop is one of the original gateway anime that really pushed through and got a wider audience. Now, if you aren't familiar with the show, let me give you a quick rundown. In 1998, Cowboy Bebop premiered in Japan and quickly stood out from other anime of its time. Created by Shinichiro Watanabe, it told the story of a group of bounty hunters, Spike Spiegel, Jet Black, Faye Valentine, Ed, and a dog named Ian, as they traveled across the solar system in their spaceship, the Bebop. The series had a loose episodic structure, with each episode acting like a self-contained short story, but also wove in deeper episodes focused on each character's past, and usually focused on something that they lost or are trying to get back. One of the most defining aspects of Cowboy Bebop was its blend of genres. It combined elements of science fiction, western, noir, martial art, and crime thriller, all tied together by a strong jazz and blues aesthetic. The soundtrack, composed by Yoko Kanno and performed by her band, the Seatbelts, became one of the more iconic soundtracks in entertainment, giving the show a unique rhythm and energy that helped it stand out, and giving me a lifelong appreciation of jazz music.
You like jazz?
While Cowboy Bebop didn't immediately take off in Japan, it gained major traction overseas, especially in the United States when it aired on Adult Swim in the early 2000s. Its more mature tone, diverse influences, and cinematic approach made it more appealing for viewers who may not have previously been interested in anime. It helped that the show was also made with a production team that actually cared about world building. Shinichiro Watanabe even stated that he wanted to take a Star Wars approach when making the settings. Alleyways should feel lived in, cigarette butts on the floor, and worn out buildings, warts and all. It's usually a pretty good mark of quality when something has attention to detail when the environments themselves can tell you a story. So it's not surprising that over time, it built a strong reputation as one of the most critically acclaimed anime series ever made. With only 26 episodes and 1 full-length feature film, Cowboy Bebop remained a complete story, one that many fans felt didn't need to be expanded or remade. It became known as a rare example of an anime that told exactly the story that it wanted to tell and ended on its own terms, which is part of the reason why there was such a strong interest and skepticism when Netflix announced a live-action adaptation. Now, reactions were mixed from the start. On one hand, the original anime had a massive fan base and a reputation for being nearly untouchable, so any attempt to recreate it was always going to face heavy scrutiny by nerds on the internet. On the other hand, there was a cautious optimism from some who were curious to see how the story and characters might be reimagined in a new medium, potentially opening up new fans to the show who just can't get past the fact that they're watching an animated cartoon. I feel like people are more accepting about it now, but there are still people out there who associate cartoons with children no matter what you show them. The Netflix series premiered in November 2021, starring John Cho as Spike Spiegel, Mustafa Shakir as Jet Black, and Daniela Pineda as Faye Valentine. The show kept much of the original structure, bounty hunters drifting through space, haunted by their past, but made a number of key changes to the tone, dialogue, and backstory of its main characters. Visually, the live-action Cowboy Bebop made an effort to recreate the stylized, offbeat world of the anime. Some praised its set design and practical effects and even dedication to the costuming, but the general consensus was that something really felt off. Where the anime balanced humor and melancholy with a cool, effortless style, the Netflix version often felt like it was trying too hard to be quirky or edgy, without the subtlety that made the original so beloved. There's a lot of scenes from the show where you could easily slide in a laugh track and it would fit right in.
After the deliciousness of the bath, you get back in the shower, rinse off, ergo, shower, bath, shower.
See what I mean? Another point of criticism was the pacing and the tone. The anime's episodic format gave it a laid-back, jazz-infused rhythm, where quiet moments carried just as much weight as the action. The Netflix version, in contrast, tried to balance serialized storytelling with fan service-heavy nods to the original, which sometimes left it feeling uneven. Characters were given expanded roles or altered arcs, most notably Vicious and Julia, whose subplot took center stage in ways that many felt distracted from the core group. Vicious was always like this boogeyman from the past that Spike had to deal with. In the anime, he only shows up 5 times in 26 episodes, but the Netflix version sought out to expand him to all 10 episodes for his subplot. Sometimes with certain characters, they make a better impact the less you show them. For example, Boba Fett famously had roughly 6 minutes of screen time across the original trilogy, yet was one of the most iconic Star Wars characters. Screen time isn't the only problem with Vicious. He was given some of the more rough material for the show and is a far departure from his anime counterpart. Ultimately, the live-action series didn't really resonate the way that Netflix had hoped. Reviews were lukewarm and fans of the original anime were generally underwhelmed or just outright disappointed. Despite early efforts to build a new franchise, Netflix canceled the show less than a month after its release. Not for anything else, but the true reason, according to one executive, being that it just didn't make the splash in the first season, so the return on investment wasn't worth the second season to them. With everyone now coming out with their own stories with how their view on the production of the show went, Shinichiro Watanabe himself, initially being involved with the production before kind of seemingly recusing himself, was quoted as saying, "It started with the scene in the casino, which made it very tough for me to continue. I stopped there and so only saw that opening scene. It was clearly not Cowboy Bebop, and I realized at that point if I wasn't involved, it would not be Cowboy Bebop." So it seemed from the start that the production team on the show and the old guard from the anime were not in lockstep with the direction that they wanted the series to go, which is fine. Most adaptations don't have to be one-for-ones, but usually in those cases when a property is successful in an adaptation, it's usually because it captures the same spirit as the original source material. Like how the Mario movie made its own storyline because the games basically didn't have a good story that could be wrapped around a Hollywood movie. And don't spat off games in the comments that they could have adapted. No studio was willing to gamble the start of a franchise on Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door. But the Netflix version of Bebop and the anime are basically two different properties that just share characters, wherein the folks behind the Netflix production sought to make something more serialized by adding in the Vicious and Julia side story that rides the episodes with Faye, Jet, and Spike doing Bebop stuff, while the anime really didn't have any focus of serialization during a chunk of its run. Heck, even some episodes could be played out of order and this story would still make sense because it was never really about an open-ended plot. The writers wanted to tell cool stories with these characters, and a lot of the Bounty of the Week stuff served to do the classic take a cool character and place them in a weird situation and see how they act. To be fair, the Netflix show does this to some extent, but when Vicious pops back up with his Syndicate storyline, it usually kills the momentum if they were building any. That's something it seems like the creative team seemed to forget, and they weren't alone in that. I remember the better parts of The Witcher's first season. To me, it was just Geralt doing the Monster Hunter Witcher stuff. Then they kind of just dropped that to make it more serialized in the second season. I dropped off because I wasn't really interested in that kind of part. That's not what sold me on the show. Now the series is Henry Cavill-less and limping to the finish line with poor Liam Hemsworth having to step in for season 4 and 5. That's what happens to franchises when writers don't exactly get the source material. I'm not saying that the writers cannot put in their own spin on it or that every adaptation needs to be a perfect copy of its source material. The boys would have never gotten off the ground if they tried that. But when you watch Netflix's Bebop, there's a lot of imitation to match the anime and none of the soul of the original. The show is shot in a very anime-esque way, which I've never really been a fan of. Real human actors trying to match the energy of animated cartoons, especially Japanese drawings, never really works out. There's also a lot of Dutch angles in the show, for what reason I have no idea, and there's certain scenes of dialogue I know would have never been a thought in the original Bebop writers' room.
You'll never know true power until you've tasted the testicles of a man who's wronged you.
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because, Jet, you are black and you are male.
That being said, the show still has some positive aspects to it. The main three are pretty well cast in their roles, especially John Cho as Spike and Mustafa Shakir as Jet. Daniela Pineda as Faye is well cast as well, it's just that the writers were attempting to overwrite her character to move away from the anime's characterization. To some aspect, they succeeded, but definitely some restraint was needed on some lines. I can't say much of the same for some of the side characters, but everyone here does their part, which much of the cheesy focus from the fans' point of view, unfortunately landing on Alex Hassel for his portrayal of Vicious. He tried his best with what he was given, but when the creative team decided that he needed to be a B story in every episode, they had to stretch out his character appearance from the original anime of being a murdering, betraying psychopath. It just didn't work in the direction that they gave him. Overall, I think the show was working against itself. You really cannot top something that's already been masterfully done. It's like someone trying to remake Breaking Bad today, but deciding that the story wasn't quite good so they can do it better. The whack thing is, Netflix did pull off an anime adaptation, and it was for One Piece of all things. The giant colossal epic manga that's so vast that anyone who dares to start from scratch and finishing is seen as an act of achievement. With a world so ridiculous it seems like a fool's errand to try and adapt it. By all means, this thing had everything working against it, and they pulled it off. How? Well, apparently Oda himself was really involved with the production, and everyone involved really loved nailing down the spirit of One Piece, and it shows. It's goofy, but the anime is too, and so they match with each other. You want to know something crazy? The production company that worked on Bebop also worked on One Piece. It looks like they learned their lesson on their second try. NetBop shares a lot of the appearance of the show, but there's still that feeling that something's missing or not quite right. And apparently it was that much of a feeling that something isn't quite right here that led fans to hating the show and poisoning the word of mouth, leading NetBop to its all-common fate of getting cancelled before it could course correct and fix those mistakes. Which is a shame. I think they could have fixed those issues if they were given a second chance. But we, as the viewer, have so many different entertainment properties vying for our attention, we're just kind of programmed to write something off immediately and not let itself work itself out first. You can kind of see this when people talk about Cyberpunk and people say, oh, that buggy mess? It's been years and a bunch of updates, dude. The game is fixed. Which is kind of sad, but hey, there's a world of TV out there and the original still exists for you to enjoy. And heck, if you enjoyed this version, good on you. But when you look at the bright side, we live in a pretty cool era of television. I know it sucks that everything is segmented on streaming services, with them actively dangling the ad-supported versions so that they can double dip on your subscription and ad money, but on the bright side, you have almost the entire history of recorded art at your fingertips. And with creatives always making something new around the corner, more than likely your new favorite show is always waiting for you a couple of months or years from now. Like the guys from Stranger Things doing Death Note on Netflix. Again. Anyway, that's all I got to say on this. Thank you for watching. Remember to give us your hashtag mailbag questions so that we can feature them and answer them in upcoming videos. See you guys next time.